Okay, this video is about cell phones and their effect on the brain. We're just going to be an introduction to the subject. So basically, here's a neuron, a brain cell. Here's the beginning of it, where the cell body is, where the DNA is. The nucleus is right here. This is called the axon hillock, where the axon potential begins. And then the sodium channels are the primary component of the charge that changes as it moves along the neuron to the axon terminal. The axon terminal is where these neurotransmitters are stored, and what happens is when the action potential reaches the axon terminal, it opens up these voltage-gated calcium channels. They allow calcium to come into the cell, and then the neurotransmitter vesicles fuse with the plasma membrane of the synaptic cleft, release the neurotransmitter into the cleft, it diffuses across the cleft, and exerts an effect on the postsynaptic neuron. So that's what you need to get out of this is these voltage-gated calcium channels. Those are the ones that, using a cell phone, opens up in your brain. It opens them up in other locations as well, but it's key that it opens them up in the brain. Okay, here's just a paper showing, talking about potentially using them for orthopedic indications as part of a treatment whereby they can actually cause some cartilage and bone growth. I'm not going to get into that. That's not the purpose of the talk. But what I wanted to show you is, though, this is a more widespread mechanism of EMF, electromagnetic field stimulation, causing calcium channels to open, calcium to enter a cell. When calcium enters a cell will typically do what it most commonly does. That would be a usual response for that. Another thing that cell phones do, unfortunately, is they will also open up the blood-brain barrier. So here's a normal, let's say, a capillary in the brain, and the red blood cells pass through it, the white blood cells pass through it, but the tight junctions between the endothelial cells, here's endothelium, these cells are intact. Basement membrane is intact. The pericytes are like the vascular smooth muscle cells. Okay, so the point is, cell phones will contribute to causing leakage of the blood-brain barrier. Head trauma will do that as well. A stroke will cause leakage of the blood-brain barrier. High-fat diets will cause leakage of the blood-brain barrier. All of these things are bad. When you have a leakage of the blood-brain barrier, you can leak some proteins from the blood into the brain parenchyma, and those will include fibrin, fibrinogen to become fibrin. Also, you'll get albumin. Albumin is the most common thing they measure to show that blood-brain barrier permeability is abnormally increased. The relevance of this as well is that normally a neuron to function effectively has to maintain a precise microenvironment, the neuronal milieu, and you have to have precise amounts of the different ions, for example, sodium in the extracellular matrix. And when you have a leaky blood-brain barrier, you can distort these gradients, the neuronal microenvironment, and that can cause brain fog and suboptimal cognitive performance. Okay. And so when you've got excessive amounts of voltage-gated calcium channels opening, you can overactivate these neurons. And here's one article here: increased blood-brain barrier permeability with cell phone. It caused opening of blood-brain barrier that persisted up to 14 days. Okay, that's bad. All right, and they're causing increased cytoplasm calcium because of the voltage-gated calcium channels letting calcium into the cell. And so you can overactivate these neurons. Overactivation of a neuron can lead to a cascade of subsequent reactions, including oxidative stress, where there's more oxidants than there are antioxidants. And this one article here comes from a paper about depletion of antioxidants. That can lead to destruction of brain cells and programmed cell death, apoptosis, which means a gradual death of the neurons whereby they can be partially recycled. But it's not good. Cell phones open blood-brain barrier and they open voltage-gated calcium channels. Voltage-gated calcium channels, in a sense, they're functioning like an excitotoxin. Remember, glutamate's about 80% of the brain neurotransmitters that causes calcium channels to open on the postsynaptic neuron. So you're adding to that effect. Same thing as psychological stress, same thing as caffeine, for example, same thing as aspartame. So you don't want an added excitotoxin for no reason on your brain cells. That's not good. Okay, this is a guy, brilliant guy, did a lot of the early work. His name was Alan Frey, and he wrote these papers back in the 1970s. So this has been actually known for a long time by the people in the field, that yes, radio frequency fields, electromagnetic fields, they will increase blood-brain barrier permeability, and it's worse with a pulse system. So a continuous current is not as bad. Pulse currents are worse, and the newer like 5G things have a pulsed nature to them, which makes them more worrisome for potentially causing cognitive impairment. Here's another article by Alan Frey and his group. Radio frequency will increase blood-brain barrier permeability. Okay. Here's just some more papers showing what this stuff's all about. Permeability of blood-brain barrier induced by, electromagnetic radiation, continuous wave and modulated. Again, worse when it's pulsed. And they could show that albumin and fibrinogen proteins from the blood were getting across the blood-brain barrier when they're not, normally they're not supposed to, okay? Blood-brain barrier permeability, and this guy was the main guy, Salford. He wrote these papers here with his group. After the cell phone, you got albumin coming across the blood-brain barrier, so that's a way to confirm that the blood-brain barrier truly was opened up. Okay, this is investigation of the efforts on, I finally got my little face to show up on these things, and it's been a while since, it basically works sometimes and it doesn't work other times, so I'll just use it when it does. Okay, investigation of the effects of 2.1 gigahertz microwave radiation on mitochondrial membrane potential. That's a little symbol right there for mitochondrial membrane potential and apoptotic activity. That means programmed cell death. So the point of this is that cell phone electromagnetic fields, they're basically toxic to mitochondria, okay? And an adult is a little bit protected by the thickness of their skull in comparison with a child. Cell phone microwave decreases gradient of intermitochondrial membrane and can cause apoptosis, cell death, okay? That's bad. They showed that it'll, cause the death of breast cells, for example. And something that'll cause the death of breast cells, you worry that it'll potentially be, and that's mitochondrial toxic, just like Warburg effect, you worry that it's going to cause the cell to transform into cancer. But again, everybody talks about cell phones and cancer. I don't think that's the main point. And I say that because, I look at brains every day and I don't see that big of a change in breast cancer. I'm sorry, in brain cancer. Glioblastoma multiforme. Maybe it doubled. So what? It's so rare that to double a really, really rare thing, it's still rare. Versus cognitive decline, off the charts. Every day, tons of patients. Cognitive decline, memory problems, can't concentrate. And then the other thing I see is, I constantly see all these old guys. Fell, hit head. See that all day long, every day. Tons and tons of them. And that usually means they're cognitively impaired, okay? And most of the cognitively impaired guys, they got cataracts. At least on one side, they've had cataract surgery, if not both sides. And there are some original research papers suggesting that cell phones increase your risk of cataract, holding it next to your head. I recommend keep it as far from your body as you can. Okay, this was just one thing about the antioxidants getting depleted, and that's another reason why, same old story. You eat the low-fat, low-sodium vegan diet, you get lots of antioxidants. They help to protect you because you got to neutralize these reactive oxygen species. The oxidative stress that's generated when you overrun the pathways of increased calcium in the cytoplasm of a neuron. Then you start going down this whole... Well, we're going to get into that. I'm going to get into the oxidative stress component in a separate lecture because there's some subtlety to it. And we got to do it justice, we got to give it a little more time. Okay, what else? Another paper showing blood-brain barrier impairment. Rats exposed to 900 megahertz for 28 days, and they got albumin crossing. These rats showed, decreased spatial memory. Here's another one. Oh, and children. Children given cell phones, the younger the age, the worse problems the children had. Were more likely to be hyperactive, have emotional instability. Yeah, I noticed a significant decline in the behavior of my kids when my wife got them cell phones. That was a big disagreement between us. I'm a big believer, kind of like, keep things as natural as you can. And that's kind of what I heard, the real smart billionaires do. You don't want your kid to have all this electronic stuff. I mean, humans aren't made for that, okay? Reading and conversation, that helps us develop, not all this fancy electronic stuff. All right, well, anyway, so that was the point that, yes, the cell phones are not good for the brain, so use your speakerphone, keep it away from you, and don't even have it right next to your breast, especially if you're a woman, have it further away from you, and try not to use it that much if you don't need to use it. So anyways, I thought that was a little interesting.